that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Greetings world, we are Anonymous. Today we bring you an interview exposing the deep state and the real leaders of the world, as well as their false flag operations used to distract us. Please pay close attention and listen until the end.
I remember the Washington Post headline for a year in review story, and this was post-Edward Snowden and countless WikiLeaks dumps. The headline read, "The year your paranoid friends were right." And over the last 18 months, we're hearing terms like deep state and shadow government being bandied about in the mainstream media. The current occupant of the White House has been known to use those terms himself on more than one occasion. And a couple of weeks ago, you may have heard it as well, I listened to George Knapp's incredible interview with Mark Gorton, the CEO of Tower Research, discussing the deep state. The permanent government, as some have described it, comprised of deeply entrenched intelligence officials, Pentagon officials, unelected oligarchs, whose tentacles reach into every crevice, every back pocket of every office and official in the land. This deep state, I suppose, is in part what Eisenhower was warning us about in his farewell address in January of 1961. Morgan Reynolds served as the chief economist for the U.S. Department of Labor during George W. Bush's first term as president. Reynolds was essentially third in command at the Department of Labor. He's also the author or co-author of a half-dozen books, most scholarly works on economics. But these days, Morgan Reynolds is best known as the man behind the website NoMoreGames.net, where he posts articles exposing various conspiracies like 9/11 and the Apollo lunar landing hoax. He'll be along to explain why many men have arrived at the White House with the best of intentions, perhaps with a populist agenda, and many promises to keep, and then suddenly, things change in a hurry. Why? It's as if the president was met by some shadowy figure in the Oval Office, think Ned Beatty from Network, where they are read the Riot Act and given new marching orders. You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Trump, and you shall atone. Suddenly, the domestic agenda to build bridges and roads at home, create jobs, fix health care, reform the IRS, gives way to one foreign misadventure and war after another. The President and your elected members of the Senate and the House are not in charge, it would appear. They are not steering the ship of state. Real power rests with those that lurk in the shadows, the shadow government, some call it. Let's shine a light backstage, shall we? We'll do that next with Morgan Reynolds of NoMoreGames.net. And don't worry, I promise we won't get too far into the weeds. Come on in, weary traveler. Hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather round the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Morgan O. Reynolds, Ph.D., currently is Professor Emeritus Economics at Texas A&M University, College Station, Texas. He's a former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Labor from 2001 to 2002, and he also served as the director of the Criminal Justice Center and senior fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis, headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Professor Reynolds is the author or co-author of 6 books, including Public Expenditures, Taxes and the Distribution of Income, Power and Privilege, Labor Unions in America, Crime by Choice, and Economics of Labor. He has published over 50 articles in referred academic journals, including the American Economic Review, Journal of Political Economy, and Journal of Labor Research. He's authored or co-authored dozens of policy studies for organizations like the Joint Economic Committee of the United States Congress and the National Center for Policy Analysis. He's written dozens of op-eds for Newsweek, The Wall Street Journal, Investor Business Daily, Fortune, National Review, Dallas Morning News, Houston Chronicle, and he has frequently testified before congressional committees and appeared on many television and radio news programs, including the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, the PBS program Debate, and CNN and the Fox News Channel. Morgan, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, I'm good and pleased to be with you, Richard.
Would it be fair to call you a policy wonk?
Yes, that's one of the hats I wear.
How does one... Before we get into this whole discussion of foreign misadventures and how presidents who run in a domestic agenda end up entangled in foreign wars, and what is the shadow government and the deep state, describe your journey? Because now you have the website nomoregames.net, and you post articles on there, write articles about 9/11 and various other conspiracies. How do you go from being this policy wonk to arriving at this place where you're at now? Was it something you saw while you were in government?
It's 9/11 for me, and I'm trying to recall Robert F. Kennedy's statement in one of the many books about the Kennedy brothers, and he says, in effect, I've learned that the world I thought I was living in isn't the real world. So on the morning of 9/11, hey, we all remember where we were, what we were doing, and I wasn't influenced by television. I was in the Department of Labor. It was really the second week I'd been there. And I escaped the building, and there was that building, this bureaucratic nightmare of a building, is 2 blocks from Capitol Hill. So if you buy into the official narrative, you'd say, "Hey, you're in danger there. The terrorists might be going after Capitol Hill." And once I learned, these were planes that allegedly disappeared into the Twin Towers, and I asked myself, I said, could planes really do that? Aluminum planes. I'm skeptical. And then I thought, hey, the experts will figure this out. It should be pretty easy. I didn't really know about Newton's laws of motion and all I've learned since. And I didn't know we'd get off on this 9/11 thing, but really I was going to go there anyway to some extent because I wanted to talk about Afghanistan. Was the first invasion post 9/11. But I put it on in the back of my mind and never thought that the U.S. government could engage in such a false flag crime against so many people, 3,000, and it's a crime against humanity, etc. But I've decided otherwise based on what I would call careful study in the subsequent 15-plus years.
Right, and as
I'm
sure we'll get into...
9/11 ended up changing everything for me.
Sure, and for many of us, obviously. Yes. And we'll get into how that obviously set the stage for Afghanistan and Iraq and the permanent presence in other places. But You were serving under President George W. Bush. I mentioned off the top how presidents often, they will run on a domestic agenda, and he certainly did. He was going to be the domestic president. And that quickly went off the rails very quickly. And I was sort of describing in my mind how I sort of see this. You know, the president, with all good intention, arrives at the White House, and sort of the metaphor, you know, there's someone there in the Oval Office, a Ned Beatty type character from Network, who reads them the riot act. And obviously that's an exaggeration. But how does it happen that presidents, whether it's Trump, who, again, a largely domestic agenda, can veer off course so wildly?
In George W. Bush's case, I would point to one Richard Cheney. And, of course, he was very experienced. I can remember he was, in effect, hired by the inexperienced governor of Texas, George W. Bush. Okay, he grew up in a famous American family, political family, but nonetheless, he wasn't experienced in the imperial capital. Dick Cheney was, and really, it was almost like Bush, Baker in the Reagan administration, where Bush, Baker were the real decision makers, I would argue, and Russ Baker and a lot of other insightful people would, I think, concur. And Cheney, of course, you know, he started that energy task force, which the Supreme Court is allowed to have kept secret. Remember O'Neill, the Treasury Secretary, who was an OMB, a budget director for many years, and then he became CEO of Alcoa. He was a good guy. I was in the same room with him over at Treasury once upon a time, and he went to this national security meeting at the end of January when the new Bush-Cheney administration came in, and Bush said, find me a way to do this, that is, invade Iraq. In March 2003, it happened. So O'Neill said, hey, this is about starting a new war? I mean, this is, of course, months before 9/11 happened. Oh, how convenient. So every administration's different. Of course, there's different people. There's different people in the permanent or deep state as well. There's turnover on Wall Street, and you know, the oil industry, the intelligence community, and the deep state. This time around, we've seen them, in effect, get control of Trump, who's reversed so many foreign policy positions that he assumed, but he's so mercurial in his personality, it seems. Doesn't have any... we knew this going in, now didn't we? He's not a principled ideologue or philosopher of any type in the conventional sense. So...
I think the mercurial nature is a bargaining ploy where he will first throw out what seems on the surface to be kind of an unreasonable negotiation stance, and then he'll sort of back off from that incrementally. And I think that's
that's the way he justifies it, I suppose. Certainly, but I think that's more window dressing than anything else. He seems to be highly influenced. Let's take the General Mike Flynn resignation, which was forced. And now I don't have any inside information here, but just observing human beings here, this whole Russia-phobia campaign, which is sans evidence, but is creating a PR public sentiment problem for them. I don't even think it's a public sentiment problem because so many people are cynical about the media and the left and the Democrats, and so they didn't elect him. he wanted to put this behind him. It would seem it's almost like his daughter Ivanka Trump. You know, whatever happened to Steve Bannon? He would be one of the people I'd say, hey, he's a warrior type. And these other people, I'm going, what? So the quality. Another problem here is I've spent 3 different 1-year plus tours in various ways, Capitol Hill and the executive branch, and you learn a lot. You really get up that learning curve. I can remember walking in the Labor Department, one of these department meetings, and I could hardly understand what they were talking about because they're using all these acronyms, right?
Sure.
Now,
sure.
I know some of them, being a labor economist, but you get up that learning curve and you see how things operate. And it's the same on Capitol Hill. So you just don't see a high level of competence. I don't think he was prepared to take on. I mean, he was great during the campaign in so many ways. Remember, I said, hey, it's great theater in a previous discussion we had. But ruling or governing, and it's almost like he doesn't. Here's a very successful businessman. You need one of the main things you need are plans, business plans, and a sequence of realistic. And what was the plan? You know, he's. And just look at it's a fiasco. The Republicans passing this American Health Care Act, which is almost like Obamacare in terms of Pelosi's famous statement. Well, we'll find out what's in it when we put it in play. And what's so frustrating to me is I was on Capitol Hill 93, 94, and I said to these other Republican staffers, since I believed I had a better feel of the pulse of the public, I said, hey, we're going to harpoon this thing to death, Hillary Care. Hillary Care never got to a vote on either the House or the Senate. And like one of the things I said is, come on, we're gonna make a bureaucratic chart of the Hillary Care IRA magazine plan.
Morgan, I got to jump in here. I apologize. We're going to head on into the break. We are talking about the deep state, the shadow government, and why the best laid plans of mice and men, right? And why so many presidents seem to go to the White House with the best of intentions, and then everything sort of unravels. And you can go on down the list, whether it's the latest President Trump suddenly finding himself in all of these foreign entanglements, the very thing the Founding Fathers warned against despite running as mainly a domestic president. How does this happen? Is it the shadow government forcing his hand? Welcome back. We are here with Morgan Reynolds, NoMoreGames.net, former chief economist with U.S. Department of Labor. We're talking deep state and shadow government. So President Johnson, of course, had a huge domestic agenda, but got mired down by the war in Vietnam. We had President Bush, who you served under, President George W. Bush, Afghanistan and Iraq. Same with Obama, Afghanistan, Iraq. And now, what is disappointing many of Trump's followers is he appears to be sort of going down that same path, this time Syria, perhaps North Korea. Let's talk about what the Founding Fathers had in mind in terms of foreign policy for the United States, and where did it go wrong?
Yeah, I think that's vital. Let's look at the wisdom of our founders, and I want to quote some of our worthy founders. George Washington, in his farewell address, which actually was a letter to the American people published in 1796, said in part, quote, "It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world," unquote. Thomas Jefferson succeeded Adams, but in 1801, Thomas Jefferson said, "Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none, I deem one of the essential principles of our government, and consequently one of those which ought to shape its administration. And I've got numerous. I've got Daniel Webster, John Quincy Adams famously said, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy." By the way, how hard is it to find monsters heading up governments around the world at any point in time? It's not difficult. And more recently, now here's the decisive change in the stream of history. It was Woodrow Wilson. As one writer pointed out in 1947, President Wilson had the full departure in mind from the founders' doctrine of neutrality when he declared, "Everybody's business is our business." Now, he did say that almost literally, but I did a double check, because Woodrow Wilson, when he's trying to sell the New World Order in the form of the League of Nations at the time, said in September of 1919, in part, Woodrow Wilson, look at it, this is 180 from the Founding Fathers, "It is our business to prevent war, and if we do not take care of the weak nations of the world, there will be war. It is everybody's business to see that nothing happens that does disturb the peace of the world," unquote.
Well,
so
bringing
there you go. This
yeah.
is, in modern garb, it's global hegemony. Now, you could back up, and two criticisms could be leveled at the founders. Well, they only took that position because they were heading up a weak nation. In other words, we didn't have the economic power.
Right, they were caught between England and France, and they were dependent on exports.
You can't take on the major powers. And the other one would be that subsequently we now have this marvelous technology, and the globe has shrunk. But neither one of those observations about the changed conditions, of course, America is the economic powerhouse of the world, and so on. The technology is vastly improved. But these are just temptations. Yes, it's a powerful nation, but the wisdom of the founders still holds. Now, I wanted to, if you'll allow me, Richard, to go to Afghanistan. This is our longest war. It's
16 years.
16 years. Okay, and one way to approach this is I learned more about Afghanistan by picking up a motorcycle. I'm a motorcycle freak, and this is a magazine called AdventureMotorcycle.com. Adventure means you go off-road, you go in rugged countries. And here we are, this little group of riders from the Western world crosses into Afghanistan from Tajikistan on the north side, the northeast side of Afghanistan. And the interviewer asks the leader, says, what about the local people? And he says the people are very similar to the Tajiks, but life is completely different in Afghanistan. And this article, by the way, Richard, is titled "Time Travel," because you're going to. And he says we think of Tajikistan as a rather backward country, but compared to Afghanistan, it's incredibly developed. It has roads, electric power, education, healthcare. Afghanistan has nothing. It's the poorest country in the region. Badakhshan is the poorest province of Afghanistan, and Wakhan Valley is the poorest part of Badakhshan. And you can imagine how basic life is out there. No one has money. Now, I take issue with that because they live off cattle. Cattle were the original commodity money. Then it morphed into metals, etc., or cigarettes in World War II, commodity prisoner of war camps, commodity money. They have money, but they as Westerners they don't understand this. At any rate, he says then again, money's practically worthless because he's thinking of paper and coins.
Right. But the point is, Morgan, where is the national interest? Where is the idea that terrorists even in 2001. Would be involved in these boot camps. Even in 2001, terrorism was online. Yeah. Just the idea of going in there and knocking out terror, training camps just doesn't wash for me. Where was
no, right? Remember, the Taliban demanded evidence to turn Osama bin Laden over to them.
Yes.
Or to put him on trial in Afghanistan. However, they wanted to designate this, and of course, none was offered, and the invasion quickly followed. Well, look what happened. You will recall this, Richard, but not all of our listeners will. And that is, remember when the inquiry was made to the FBI, why isn't OBL wanted for 9/11?
Not enough evidence.
The FBI respondent said, quote, "The reason why 9/11 is not mentioned in Osama bin Laden's most wanted page is because the FBI has no hard evidence connecting bin Laden to 9/11, unquote." So, yeah, what I'd say is you're an invader. You have no legitimacy. You're there on a false pretext. This is not going to turn out well, and it certainly hasn't. But, the reason the FBI says the FBI, all we do is, present this evidence to the Department of Justice, and then they have to go before a grand jury and, satisfy them, right? And they couldn't do that.
Right. So it was a false pretense. But it was almost as if the idea was to get the United States involved in this quagmire. And then the Soviets learned this lesson very hard. It's almost as if these misadventures are by design. They are supposed to fail.
Yes, right. Yeah, it's where empires go to die. And listen to this. This is a side effect of the whole arrogance and wonderfulness of the U.S. and its creating freedom and democracy overseas with 50 calibers and drone bombs. In 2001, of course, the U.S. in the fall invaded Afghanistan. In 2003, Afghanistan Bank, who made up that name, I don't know. It was established by presidential decree, a central bank.
Bingo.
The same thing was done by the U.S. in Iraq and Libya. A central bank with funny money, the whole dishonest fiat money, national debt,
right.
Private debt.
Plus, Saddam Hussein was threatening to use the euro instead of the U.S. dollar as the currency of trade for oil.
Right, and Saddam made noises to that effect as well, and then they got invaded too. But,
there you go.
It's claimed that in Libya, of course, Gaddafi was murdered in 2011 and has become chaos and a great place for terrorists and tribalism and so on. And the rebels established a new central bank of Libya there and formed a new national oil company. So, hey, energy rears its ugly head once again.
I never understood the Libya situation because Gaddafi had pretty much reformed himself. He had, he was Tony Blair's new best buddy. He was invited to New York. He had turned over the Pan Am hijackers. He had renounced terror.
Yeah, well, they didn't do Libya. Israel did that.
Well, I had my doubts about Libya's involvement, but the point is he had reformed himself, and then suddenly he
warned the West that we're the only thing that stands between you and a mass migration into the welfare states of Western Europe. Once Libya goes, there's going to be people en masse attempting to cross the Med. And that's a huge problem now, of course, is all the instability and chaos created in the Middle East. And South Asia has created a human refugee crisis.
Right. You mentioned Woodrow Wilson earlier, and he had sort of his Svengali, which was Colonel House, his silent partner. Yes. Is that how it works? That, for example, it was said that Reagan had Vice President Bush foisted upon him. It wasn't his choice. They needed someone to keep a check on the outsider, Reagan. So is that how it works, that the shadow government appoints a handler for the president in case they go off script?
I think the evidence shows that was the case with Reagan and Bush. But hey, techniques vary, and conditions vary, and personalities vary. Is what I would say. I don't think there's any SOP.
Standard operating
all,
procedure.
All
right.
kinds of ways to get people to cooperate. Now, don't you? You know, look,
all right.
Look at these pictures of your grandchildren.
Right.
You dig? You know, but that coercive is really the last resort. You know, look at how stupid the U.S. is. Where yesterday new sanctions were imposed on North Korea. Now, sanctions are one step short of war. They are a coercive tool, but there's a couple things wrong with their success rate. Number one, black markets. You know, evasion of these sanctions and trading under different labels and you enforce it. And then the second thing is you're not dealing with the way humans react, right? If you come in, Richard, and you come and threaten me that you're going to do X, Y, or Z, what am I going to do? Just cower and submit? Maybe I'm going to do something else that's hostile toward this. I mean, it's just ignoring, and especially in group situations where people are commanding lots of government, and which is inherently an institution of coercion. Hey, you're telling me what to do? You know.
Well, we all agree that Kim Jong-un is a horrible, despicable waste of flesh, but here's the thing that I'm wondering, and I've listened to a bunch of military experts who watch their military parades, and they say those weapons are fake. I don't even think they work. Is this just a lot of smoke and mirrors with North Korea? I mean, do they even have a viable?
Some of it is. Wouldn't you bet? Yeah, some of it is. And however, somebody in the New York Post was pointing out that in 1994, around there, Jimmy Carter got a Nobel Peace Prize, and the North Koreans got 2 nuclear reactors on the promise that, and with some kind of international inspection, that they wouldn't weaponize. Well, by 2002, apparently they did have a working nuclear bomb or 2. So, but hey, China, I believe that now one of the good things that's happened lately was, and this might be superficial, the Donald seems to, he had the Chinese leader down to what is that, Margot?
In Florida, right. The Winter White House.
And they, it seems like they buddied up, and he's looking to China to help him out and help China itself out. But this whole thing seems terribly unnecessary, doesn't it? I mean, this Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, just provokes things by talking smack, and this isn't the best way to promote peace, but apparently that's not the aim, as we suspect, of the deep state, right? It's all about what Dwight Eisenhower warned us about, and the intelligence community is even more dangerous than the U.S. military. Much of the U.S. military, at least, it's above board, and we can see what's going on, whereas the intelligence community, the covert operations, etc. But what's going to kill the United States ultimately is what kills all empires, which is military overreach and bankruptcy.
We will we'll circle around to
the head of the special operations pleading with, hey, he's got 8,000 special ops troops, and they're on 80 different countries. and you're calling on us to do more. Aren't you a little overextended here, folks?
Yeah, it would. It's pretty obvious that that's the case, and we will talk about the sort of the domestic agenda as well in the next hour. And the debt, obviously, is top of mind with you as a former chief economist with the Department of Labor.